ASTROTURFING, the deceptive practice of presenting an orchestrated marketing or public relations campaign in the guise of unsolicited comments from members of the public. Apparently, this has now become some kind of a conversational piece in the console discussion or in the gaming scene discussion or whatever it is. However you want to chalk it, people will accuse or get accused of maybe not being honest in some particular instance. But what I think is the most important thing is if these accusations can stick or not stick. And I think when this astroturfing thing comes up, it's because one content creator has made it very popular by saying it many times over and over and over again, pretty much laying blame at the feet of those who may have a position on an issue as trying to parrot what executives from other companies have said. Now, the very simple solution to this whole thing is to examine everybody's claims under the light. And what's happened lately is, as this examination has been going on in the last few days, because now everybody is aware, paying attention, the execs have come out to speak in the same window. And I told y'all this, when Shuhei Yoshida did those two interviews, actually the one with Greg Miller, that was the one that really did break a lot of the narrative. And then Matt Piscatella came on to Greg Miller's show as well, and he made mention of some things that the industry is going through. Those two interviews by themselves, especially coming one from what I think is a neutral source and another one coming from a PlayStation source, single-handedly broke a lot of the fake narratives that we had been seeing around. Narratives such as, and I will speak for myself on the Video Game Fight School channel, narratives like PlayStation doesn't need the money that it's gaining from putting its games on PC. Yes, I got those comments. Many of you don't know, but I've been making comments on this particular conversation since 2023 and possibly even much longer in a much more lighter approach. I didn't necessarily delve deep into the conversations. I was always making videos on The Division. But boy, I got a lot of people tell me that I was crazy, that PlayStation was not going to prioritize PC, that it was only going to do A, B, C, D, and E, only for a former PlayStation executive to come out and say, we put games on PC in order for us to basically go ahead and make more money. And remasters and remakes, which they also put on PC, in fact, they're launching them on PC day one these days, some of them anyways, are a way for us to basically go ahead and make money to fund other projects. Then we had the Matt Piscatella death blow. That's the one that basically silenced every single party and made us aware that if you're going to launch a game, you're going to have to deal with the 11-year-old's favorite game, Fortnite, because that was the game that was basically taking everybody's time. Then you had other interviews. You had Shuhei go on Colin Moriarty's podcast, Sacred Symbols, and some of the things that he also mentioned there really did sound very damning against narratives that had been built by a cohort of people who called themselves more pro PlayStation talking heads. What's even funny too is in the same time, in the Xbox side, the executives had been talking and, exposing their plans as to how they wanted to go ahead and laterally move their games across the board to platforms where gamers were playing. But the Xbox community, some of the members of the Xbox community were a little stiff-necked. They didn't like the idea. So they, in some sense, kept either going on the woe is me tours or continuing to complain or continuing to ask questions that were basically irrelevant, having seen Xbox was already, in a sense, settled on doing this. So across the board, we got to hear the industry's newest moves from a lot of these executives. But somewhere, somehow, I think because this has now pretty much come to confirm what some of us have been suspecting, that a lot of these so-called fanboys, didn't matter who they were, who did not necessarily pay attention to the market, were fomenting their claims. Many of them did not have any solid backing to the things that they were saying. They were just talking out of place. So now everybody's idea is on the chopping block. My ideas, your comments, my statements, my videos, your podcast, whatever, it is now on the chopping block for everybody to basically come out and look and say, okay, who's telling us the truth and who's capping? It's just that simple. And so when I was making my own hypotheses, talking about how PlayStation will eventually need those 30 million users on Xbox, who some of these so-called PlayStation gamers had always said is not enough for developers to worry about making their games for, or PlayStation would either have to then go ahead, if it's not going to port those games to those 30 million users on Xbox, it would have to fire its developers. And to see PlayStation go ahead and take that particular approach and fire its developers. To then also go ahead and see how so-called PlayStation fans kept saying that it wasn't worth it for these developers to port their games on Xbox because no one on Xbox was even going to buy the game anyways. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. That was the narrative. Do y'all remember that? I remember the comments kept saying that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. That's why Final Fantasy wasn't on there, only for us to discover from developers like Pearl Abyss that for the most part, the exclusivity deals in the third-party sense coming from PlayStation was barring games from going to Xbox. Do y'all remember Pearl Abyss? They had somebody document one of their shareholders' meetings where they came out and told their shareholders that PlayStation approached them to basically do an exclusivity deal that blocked the game from going to Xbox for at least a year. So all that talk that the developers did not prioritize Xbox for most of these games that were coming on PlayStation that were third-party games not going to Xbox was the, fashioning of PlayStation on the background, pretty much trying to ruin Xbox by making that platform seem like it wasn't relevant for gamers by spending money there, thereby destroying those stupid narratives. So now everybody's claim that they've made about these issues without factoring the truth are now under the microscope. But most of them are worried. They're concerned. You know why? Because people are now much more bold to basically go ahead and look at what the executives have said, look at statements, look at meetings, look at interviews, and be able to juxtapose their positions with those particular realities. That's why many people are either panicking or freaking out or at risk of becoming irrelevant because they've spent time fomenting very, very poor narratives. No analysis, no evidence examination, nothing to back up their claims. Only what they felt needed to be the truth was what pretty much drove most of them. And I can tell you it was a very bad bet for them to actually engage in that because we're in the information age. The currency in today's day and age is information. So what's going to happen is more and more of these interviews are going to keep happening. More and more executives who have basically no filters or no holds anymore are going to continue to unveil to us the good old days. Like Peter Moore went ahead to, say he in his time, they encouraged a console war because it basically, I think his reason would probably have made it, viable because it probably continued to bring these things to the front and center of the conversation. So the so-called talk about astroturfing and all of the above is simply solved by just examining people's positions, number one, and juxtaposing them with the available data on hand. It's very simple. That's how it could be solved. Not by somebody going ahead to repeat it over and over and over and over again until it has no meaning. And that's what we're going to see very soon. We're going to see, and I've said this before, we're going to see it. People are going to get a lot more examination now with the claims that they make. And so they're going to be in a position where they actually have to make content that is representative of what's going on in the gaming industry. Or they're just going to have to pretty much fade into irrelevance because they're going to be unveiled as people who are not really interested in the conversation, but perhaps may have ulterior motives. Comment section, talk to me. Peace out.